Before moving on and start to implement the third panel in our list, we will need to set up some specific components, classes, as part of our development process. So I went to hangman gameutil package and let's create a class called spring context. Click on finish. We'll need to annotate this class with a component stereotype, and let's also add a descriptive comment such as this component will be used to auto-wire the Spring application context inside the non-Spring corresponding class. You will see at a later point in this course how this class will be used. So Spring context needs to implement the application context aware. We'll also use the auto-wired annotation. And let's add a variable, a static variable of type application context, and let's call it application context. Be sure to import it from the Spring Framework corresponding package. And we'll also need to override the setApplicationContext method since we implement the application context aware. This method receives the application context parameter and throws a beans exception type. I imported the beans exception. Now we will use the Spring context dot application context to be equal to the application context received as a parameter in the setApplicationContext method. And let's also return the application context using a static method. And over here we're returning just the application context. Okay, let's move forward and work on the listeners that will be used in our application. We'll have a mouse listener and also a button listener. So let's go under hangman game guy listeners and create our mouse listener that will respond to mouse events for our buttons that will be created in our course. This mouse listener class needs to extend the mouse adapter. I set up a simple empty constructor for our class. Let's add a comment for the method that we'll set up. Handle the case when mouse enters a specific button. The method needs to be called mouse entered of type void and receives a mouse event as a parameter. We will need to get the button that we selected. Actually, the button that triggered this mouse event. when we enter on the button with the mouse, this event will be automatically generated. So if the button chosen is enabled and we went with the mouse over it to basically hover the button, we need to set the background color as an effect. And let's set it to white so that the user knows on which button he hovered. Now let's add a new method that will handle the case when mouse exits the button. We need to call it mouse exited, of type void of course. Same to the mouse entered, this receives a mouse event. And we need to check if the chosen button is enabled. We'll set a specific background color to this button also. Okay, we set the background color. Let's create a new class called button listener. So this button listener class needs to implement the action listener. Let's also add a method that needs to be implemented, action perform, that receives an action event E. We need to get the current button that we clicked on using the same process, E get source. We'll simulate the fact that we don't want the button to be selected once again, so we disable it, and also set the background color to green. We will also need to get the button corresponding letter, since each button will have a letter. We'll do this using the getText to char array of 0. This will in fact get us the first and only existing letter to that button that is added to that button. And now if you recall the application context, the Spring Context class will be used here to retrieve the application context and at a later point in this chapter you will see, once we set up all the buttons in place, how we will be able to use this application context inside our module.